Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiro Vanachari Yamuna Tiro Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava.
Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hope you can all see my screen and hope everyone is doing well. So I know it's a long weekend and it's holiday time. So I just wanted to check last week if there is enough interest. I know some of you are interested, and I was hoping we'll continue with the class, considering that I think a lot of our activities are limited outside because of the pandemic, but we still might have less attendance today, and maybe more people will join shortly. But I think we can get started. And thank you once again for joining for during the holiday weekend. So I really appreciate that, and so it's also inspiring for me to see that enthusiasm and interest. So I think we can continue with the session, and as always, the session is recorded. So if someone who might not be able to join today, you can always listen to the recording. So having said that, let's dive into this. So I think we are on the second chapter, and so far we have covered 31 verses, and we have taken time to go into all the details of each and every purport. And so far Krishna has been describing analytically the nature of the soul, and how the soul is different from the body, and how Arjuna should not lament for the death of the body, which would be inevitable in the due course of life, as long as he is dedicated to do his prescribed duty as a Kshatriya. So that is the overarching principle that he should go by. And Krishna is going to elaborate a little bit more on the prescribed duties later in this chapter. But the fundamental basis again of their argument is that it does not encourage unnecessary killing of anybody, because that's destruction of life. But if that happens in the due course of executing one's duty, especially for Kshatriya, if he's not motivated by any other ulterior reasons, then Arjuna, acting as a Kshatriya, in the course of execution of his duty, if there are, he was specifically concerned about his grandfather and teacher, and so Krishna is saying that he should not be worried about that. Now, in this chapter, Krishna provides very thematic arguments. So far, he has explained the nature of the soul. So that section is complete now. Now he's going to talk about, he's going to elaborate a little bit more on other kind of arguments, like, if Arjuna is going to bring infamy to you, for instance, right? Practical worldly considerations that Arjuna should think about, right? And then after that section, he actually is going to talk about fruitive activities, or why people are motivated to act, right? So ultimately, the initial motivation for anyone is economic development, or we want to obtain something, right? That is the motivation for any action. And so Krishna is going to elaborate a little bit more on that. So the next section that we will cover today, if you think of this in different themes, analytical arguments related to soul, which is complete. Then the next theme today we will be discussing is the theme about mundane or worldly considerations. And when we live in a society, there are things that we do that affect the society. Similarly, so the society itself builds an opinion about us, and how we behave, or how we interact, or what we do. And then Krishna, so that is the theme for today's discussion. So that theme will, I think we ended verse number 31 last time. So you think of that theme, it starts from verse 32, and then it goes all the way up to verse 39 or 38. And so since it is, all these verses are in that similar theme, I'm going to try to bucket all of them in one theme. So what I'll do is I'll read the translation of all this 8 or 7 verses, and then we will go into the purport. And so what will happen now going forward is that there will be, the conversation will start getting very philosophical, and if we do like verse by verse, then you would lose the theme, how the theme is developing, like the storyline in terms of the arguments that Arjuna brings forward, and how Krishna addresses those. In order to just keep that logical sequence, what I'll try to do is each class I'll read the translations of the particular theme that we want to cover, and then we'll go into the purports and look at some of the important points. So we'll take that approach, and I'm happy to hear if you have any feedback at the end of the class. Okay, so let's start with verse number 32. O Partha, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of heavenly planets. If, however, you do not perform your religious duty of fighting, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duties, and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. People will always speak of your infamy, and for a respectable person, dishonor is worse than death. The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think that you have left the battlefield out of fear only, and thus they will consider you insignificant. Your enemies will describe you in many unkind words and scorn your ability. What could be more painful for you? O son of Kunti, either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planets, or you will conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Therefore, get up with determination and fight. Do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat. And by doing so, you shall never incur sin. So I'll stop right here. And so if you look at the theme, Krishna is presenting different worldly considerations, right? And for Kshatriya, honor is very important. There are many stories like Dhruva Maharaj. I mean, he was refused to. His stepmother did not allow him to sit on the lap of his father, Maharaj Uttanapad. And he's just a child, 5 years old child, and he felt so much insulted that he talked to his mom, his biological mom, real mom, and asked like, this is what happened, and please advise what I should do. And mother suddenly just says that what your stepmother says, it's true, because your father loves her more than he loves me, and because of that your stepmother is taking undue advantage. And though your father did not really he did not speak up to your defense, and so your stepmother told you that the only way you can sit on his lap is that you have to take birth from her womb. So this is what Dhruva Maharaj's stepmother says to him, who is just a 5-year-old child. And so he says, okay, but I feel very insulted, and I want to achieve a better kingdom than even my father, right? And his mother advises that, well, only Narayana can grant you all benedictions. And say, where do I find Narayana? Well, you find him in the forest. So he goes to the forest, just a 5-year-old child. And when Narada Muni sees him, he comes to know about Dhruva. He's going to the forest. So he comes and questions him. And he wanted to test. It's just a 5-year-old child. He says, what are you doing? He says, no, this is what happened, and I want to, I want to worship Narayana. He says, why you feel insulted? Again, one should not be, one should overcome honor and dishonor. And anyway, you are a child, you're interested in, children are generally interested in, a lot of playthings. Why you take all this seriously? So he says, what you say might be true, but this has inflicted me, I cannot bear it. So again, the point is, so in that, Narada Muni says that, well, such are the Kshatriyas, they cannot take insult. So in that theme, Krishna is elaborating on that theme and trying to convince Arjuna. You think that you have all these very high ideals for which you want to give up fight. You're not afraid of fighting, but you wanted to protect the life of your grandfather and your teacher, and you're not interested in enjoying the kingdom, and so you want to give up. But your enemy is not going to think like that, and they are not going to understand that this is the reason why you have left the battlefield. They will just say that you are a coward. And Krishna is again telling it from his own experience, in the sense that when Jarasan attacked Mathura, 17 times, Krishna single-handedly defeated his army of millions of soldiers and elephants and chariots, and then every single time he arrested Jarasan, and then just insultingly released him. And again, Jarasan would come and attack, and so he kept doing 17 times. And Krishna I want to spend all my life doing this, and necessarily so many people are dying. And at the same time, Kali, when Jarasan was planning his 18th attack, Kalyavan, at the same time, also was planning attack to Mathura. So Krishna took an opportunity to, leave Mathura and start his Dwarka pastimes, which he also wanted to establish and show that opulence and other aspects of the Dwarka Leela, which is again happening eternally in the spiritual world. So he goes and establishes the city of Dwarka, and then moves all the residents of Mathura over there, and then he comes back to Mathura, waiting for Jarasandha to come. And when he comes, he flees. And what happens is Jarasandha calls him coward, right? What about the fact that he already defeated you 17 times single-handedly, right? He's not afraid of you. Of course, whatever ill names you call to Krishna, that becomes his glorification. And so Krishna is worshipped as Ranachhod, this famous temple of Ranachhod in Gujarat. So Rana means battlefield, Chhod means one who runs away. But he's he's still called a coward, right? So Krishna is saying, Arjuna, you think of you, what's going to happen, right? If you're going to run away from the battlefield, they're not going to think that, oh, you are such an elevated person, you're worried about the life and respect of your grandfather and teacher. He's just going to bring you infamy, and for a Kshatriya, a respectable person, dishonor is worse than death. And so these are the different kind of arguments that Krishna provides. And he says, actually, Kshatriyas, because Kshatriyas know that if they die on the battlefield, they will achieve heavenly planets. And so sometimes those who are not properly situated, or they might be attracted by that promise, they might call for a war unsought. Sought. They actually look out for the war actively, unnecessarily, right? Not one who is a proper Kshatriya would never do that. But there is a possibility that somebody is motivated. Okay, I'm gonna just keep fighting. Either I'll expand my kingdom, or if I die, I'll go to the heavenly planet. But here you are not seeking out war. Krishna is telling to Arjuna, right? This war has come to you. You did not ask for this war. So thereby other Kshatriyas who are actually looking to fight, right? And sometimes they don't have that opportunity to fight. They have to go out of the way. But you are getting a war unsought. What else could be a boon for a Kshatriya? So he's reminding him of that. But now that war has come upon you, if you neglect your duties, you're definitely going to incur sin. You're going to bring infamy to yourself. It's those who actually respected you as a great warrior so far, because Arjuna was respected as a great warrior, right? But they won't respect you anymore. He was known as Gudakesha, but was conquered sleep. He was the holder of Gandiva, the bow which was given to him by Indra himself. Dhananjaya, conqueror of wealth and kingdoms. So all these different names, they glorify Arjuna, he says, but all your esteem would be just lost, would be all lost. They will just consider you insignificant. They will say a lot of unkind words to you. They will question your ability. What can be more painful, right? So why you want to bring this upon you? You're not going to, no one is going to understand all your, great feelings that you have, all your ideals. Instead, you should, just execute your duty. There are only two outcomes. Either you get killed on this battlefield, in which you achieve heavenly planets, or if you win, you have the kingdom that you can rule in a righteous way, for the benefit of your subjects. So therefore, just, with great determination, you should just simply fight. And you should not consider, and beyond that, you should again not consider whether you're going to win or lose, because it's in a way it's a win-win situation. What you're going to lose or what you're going to gain, that should not be your motivation, that you're going to lose your near and dear ones. You should not consider happiness and distress, because duty means duty. When you execute duty, you don't have other considerations that come into being, right? There are many different examples and of that warrior or Kshatriya spirit in all traditions of the world, right? It's of course Kshatriya, they have that very strong spirit, but you will find that kind of spirit in other parts of the world also. And I can't remember the exact reference, but it probably, I don't know, maybe around Second World War. But there was this American woman. The lady, she had like 7 or 8 sons, and she actually sent all of them. They all joined the army, and they went to fight, and I think they all died. And so the president, I don't know who was the president at the time. If I am right, I think it was Second World War, but could have been first. But so he writes a letter, and he appreciates the contribution, but especially he's grieving for the loss. And he sends a condolence letter to the grieving mother. The mother replies back that if I had more sons, I would have gladly given them for the sake of the service to the country. And so she was not grieving in that sense, and she was very proud of her achievements of her sons. And so the idea that that the duty overrides everything, right? And so that spirit is a very Kshatriya spirit that is found among people of this particular kind of nature, who are the ideal individuals to join armed forces. So these are the arguments that Krishna provides. So now let's look into the purports. So verse number 32. Yadrichaya chopannannam swargadhvaram apavritam shukhina kshatriya partha labhante yuddham idrasham. O Partha, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of heavenly planets. Purport. As the supreme teacher of the world, Krishna condemns the attitude of Arjuna. I do not find anything good in this fighting. It will cause perpetual habitation in hell. So these are the kind of arguments that Arjuna had provided. And so he wanted to become non-violent in discharging his duty. But for a Kshatriya, to be on the battlefield and become non-violent, it makes no sense, right? It's the philosophy of the fools. Srila Prabhupada is using that phrase over here, and he's quoting Parasar Smriti, which is one of the religious codes established by Parashar Muni, who was the father of Vyasdev, according to which it says that the Kshatriya's duty is to protect the citizens from all kind of difficulties. So in the previous class, we went into the explanation of Kshatriya. If you break it down in Kshatriya into 2 words, Kshata means to harm, Trayati means to deliver. So those who deliver the subjects, deliver meaning they protect the subjects from being harmed by evil forces, those are called Kshatriyas, right? And so Kshatriya's duty is to protect the citizens from all kind of difficulties. And for that reason, they have to use violence where it is required in order to establish law and order. Therefore, he has to conquer the soldiers of inimical kings. And thus, with religious principles, he should rule over the world. So this is the duty of Kshatriya, right? So again, when Yudhishthira Maharaj had Rajasuya Yagya, he's establishing his authority not for the sake of winning or conquering the world, not to aggrandize oneself or one's ego. That was not the intention, because what did he ask Duryodhan? He said, I just give us 5 villages. As a Kshatriya, our dharma is to rule, right? We have to act according to our nature. We don't aspire to have, great kingdom. Just we are 5 brothers. Give 1 village, just 1 village, not even a bigger district or anything. But Duryodhan did not even give 1 village to them, right? Of course, he later, for the sake of dharma, he did Rajasuya Yagya. For that, one has to establish one's supremacy, where either all the kings of the world, they accept the authority of Yudhishthira, and those kings can continue to rule. It's not that, but they rule under the direction and under the umbrella of Yudhishthira as the leader of everyone. Now, if some king does not agree with their authority, then he can challenge the king, and in a battle, And if he comes out to be victorious, then one can establish the authority over the individual who was trying to do the Rajasuya Yagya and establish the supremacy. So again, the idea being is that even when one is righteous, one has to be able to enforce law and order. That means one has to have that military capability. So even if a person is righteous, but if that king does not have that might or power to establish one's authority, then one cannot rightfully rule, because the other forces will overcome. And so for that reason, it's a either or, where one who is performing Rajasuya Yagya will ask others to voluntarily accept his authority or challenge him, right? So so this is a duty according to the code, right? Then one has to conquer the soldiers, not just conquer unnecessarily, because many of them might be, many kings might willingly accept the authority, but those who are inimical, they won't accept the authority. There's always someone who is going to be inimical, and that faction has to be challenged. Just like after the independence of India from the British rule, we had Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, right? And he led the Indian army, and he went to all the sovereign kings. Now those kings had actually already lost power in some sense, because the British were ruling India. So they were just nominal kings. They were not able to challenge the authority of the British. So those kings had already lost their Kshatriya spirit. They are not real kings, but they had fallen to different vices, and rather they were actually using the military help of the British and paying them huge amount of money to provide the support, or you're using the British army in lieu of monetary payment to fight other rival kings, right? And that's how British were able to establish their authority. But anyway, so after independence, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, he went to all the sovereign kings and said, you have two options: either you join the Indian Union voluntarily, or you have to fight the Indian army. And almost everyone agreed to join the Union. I think it was Nizam of Hyderabad who was not willingly agreeing to it. But later also he conceded. And the only region which was a little bit more complex was Kashmir issue, which still hasn't been resolved. But again, it's the same idea. Either the individual kings, they either willingly accept the authority, or they have to fight, right? So considering all the aspects, Arjuna had no reason to refrain from fighting. If he should conquer his enemies, then he would enjoy the kingdom. And if he loses, and if he dies on the battlefield, then he would be elevated to the heavenly planet. Any questions on that particular verse? Okay, verse number 33. Atha chetatvam imam dharmyam sangramam na karishyasi tatah sarvadharmam kritim cha hitva papam avapsyasi. If, however, you do not perform your religious duty of fighting, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duties, and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. So, yeah, Arjuna was a famous fighter. He attained fame by fighting great warriors, right? Even including Lord Shiva. After fighting and defeating Lord Shiva in the dress of a hunter, Arjuna pleased the Lord, and therefore he received a reward or a weapon called Pasupat Astra. So Pasupat Astra. So it's a divine weapon that he could invoke, and this is coming directly from Lord Shiva, who is Rudra himself, and he has a great power for destroying or destruction, especially towards the end of the day of Brahma, or the end of Brahma's life. He brings about annihilation of the world. So very powerful. He's Mahadev. He's the chief among all the demigods, right? He's the chief. That's why he's known as Mahadeva. Everyone else is known as Devas, but Lord Shiva is Mahadeva. So Arjuna is who? Arjuna is also not ordinary, because Krishna and Arjuna are, so Arjuna, Krishna are Nar and Narayan. Arjuna is Nara, Krishna is Narayan, right? Or rather the other way around, but they're the same personality. So in Badrik Ashram, Badrinath, the Nar Narayan deities, they are worshipped. So Arjuna is Nara, Krishna is Narayana. So Arjuna, being a powerful personality, again he was able to defeat Lord Shiva, and he pleased him, and then he got this benediction and boon, this particular weapon called Pasupat Astra. Even Dronacharya had given him many benedictions and awarded him special weapon by which he could kill even his teacher. So before the war of Mahabharata, Arjuna approaches his guru. He bows down him to him. He offers his respect, and he says that this war is about to begin, and you are such a great you are also you are such a powerful personality. Dronacharya again was not an ordinary person. He was very skilled in different military warfare, and it was impossible to kill him. And just like a student before any big exam, right, would go to one's teacher to seek blessings, and not only blessings, seek guidance. Hey, what I should do, right? Like a coach. Even if it's a sports game, you go to a coach, the coach tells you, be careful about this, you should do that. And the teacher wants wants student to win or succeed, right? That is the success of the teacher. Now, in this particular scenario, Arjuna and his teacher happens to be on the opposite sides. And sometimes life is like that, which brings us into situations which are not ideal. And so as a student, sincere student, one who seeks guidance, he sought guidance from his teacher. He said, okay, I'm going to fight a very formidable opposing parties, and you are one of them, and it's not easy to defeat you, so tell me, how can I kill you, right? And so being an ideal teacher, and Dronacharya is not worried about his life, and then he gives him the he gives him special weapon by which he could kill his teacher. And he also asks that, hey, he tells him, well, I cannot be killed until I want to be killed, right? And I have lost all faith and hope. And that hope and faith again was that Dronacharya was very attached to his son Aswathama. And then his Aswathama's death would actually be very would bring about such moroseness to him. Nothing else could bring such level of moroseness for Dronacharya that he would give up his fighting spirit, right? And so that aspect is exploited later in the war, where again Aswathama is a Chiranjeevi, would not be killed. One of the few living beings who were awarded with a very long life. He's still living, Aswathama. So anyway, Arjuna is awarded that benediction. So he had a lot of these credentials, and he has a lot of reputation, right? And all that reputation was now at stake, if he's going to neglect his duties. And so Krishna is just recommending him that, well, this is, you should think about this also, right? You should think how people would perceive it. No one's going to appreciate your goodwill that you have for your teacher and your grandfather. And not only that, if you neglect your duty, then you will incur sin, right? Because one would have failed in execution. Again, being Kshatriya is a great responsibility that one has in the service of the subjects, right? If is fighting on behalf of Yudhishthira, his elder brother, to establish his rightful authorities so that he can rule in a rightful religious way for the benefit of the subjects, right? And if he fails in delivering the promise, the great responsibility that is put on his shoulders, then obviously he would incur sins. Just like even in in any government position, right? They are called civil servants, right? Why are they called civil servants? Because they have, it's not that they have all this power for their own aggrandizement, right, or for their own enjoyment. And if they fail in execution of their duty, then they could be suspended, and under the allegation of neglect of duty, right? So it's a similar concept. Any questions on that particular verse number 33? Okay, verse 34. Akirting chapi bhutani kathayishyanti te avyayam sambhavitasya chakirtir maranad atirichyate. People will always speak of your infamy, and for a respectable person, dishonor is worse than death. So Krishna is continuing on the same theme, and he's saying that, again, if you leave the battlefield, you will be called a coward, right? No one's going to appreciate why you are doing they won't understand, first of all, right? They will just say that, hey, Arjuna was afraid and he ran away, and that ill fame or dishonor is worse than a death. Why? Because when one dies, the body is destroyed, and with the body, the recollection or remembrance of that life is destroyed, right? So last time we gave the example of the son of Chitraketu, who had died, and his father was grieving so much. He asked Narada Muni to bring him back to life. But what happened when he came back to life? He was not able to identify who their parents were. His father was very happy to see him, but he's like, I don't know who you are. I had so many parents in so many species of life. I have moved on, and I don't have any recollection. So even if one had a very miserable life, when that life is over, right, that is the end of that karmic reaction, and in that sense it's a good thing. We don't want to remember all those horrible things from our previous lives, otherwise our current life will get messed up. And so death is something that allows the living entity to move on, right? And one set of karmic conditioning is over, and then the soul gets a new body. But what happens, though death is despised and no one wants to die, right? And one thing that everyone, when it comes to saving one's life, if he has, if somebody is terminally ill, or there are any kind of threatening situation to life, one would not worry about wealth. One would spend all wealth that one has accumulated, all authority that one would have, to try to save oneself from death, right? So death is the single most thing that no one wants, right? And so in that sense, there is nothing worse than death. But then dishonor is worse than death, because what happens is that, unlike death, where one is not connected to that karmic conditioning anymore, one is still living, and so one is still in that situation. And so when the dishonor is brought upon someone, then it's worse than death, because at every moment that individual is dying, in shame, or is afflicted by the harsh words that others might have spoken. Now, if someone who is fully transcendental, that person is not affected by either fame or infamy, right? And which is what the teachings of Bhagavad Gita is, and then we will cover those aspects later in the discussion when those topics comes up. But for here is beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna has taken the position of a conditioned living entity who is not an liberated person, right? So to set an example, or to set the scene for the Bhagavad Gita to be spoken for everyone to learn. And so in that regard, or in that context, Krishna is saying that, hey, if dishonor comes onto you, it would be worse than a death, because you'll be dying every moment. And so better to die in a battle, right, gloriously, rather than bring in infamy upon yourself, right? So yeah, so this is the final judgment that Krishna provides to Arjuna to convince him not to withdraw. Any questions or comments on verse number 34? Okay, verse number 35. Bhayadranad uparatam mamshyante tvam maharatha yesham cha tvam bahumatto bhutva yashyashi lagavam. The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think that you have left the battlefield out of fear only. Thus they will consider you insignificant. So Krishna is telling to Arjuna, do not think that the great generals like Duryodhana, Karna, other contemporaries will think that you have left the battlefield out of compassion for your brothers and grandfather. They will think that you have left out of fear for your life, and thus your high estimation of your personality will be ruined. So that's, we already discussed that. Okay, verse number 36. Avachya vadamscha bahun vadishyanti tavahita nindantastava samarthyam tato dukhataram nukim. Your enemies will describe you in many unkind words and scorn your ability. What could be more painful for you? Lord Krishna was astonished in the beginning at Arjuna's uncalled for plea for compassion. And he described his compassion as befitting the non-Aryans. Anaryam, ajustam, he says in the beginning. This is not the Aryas behave. Aryas are specifically doesn't refer to the Aryan race, but people who follow the Varnashram system of the scientific division of labor based on one's nature, right? And we discussed the detail why that is important. Is when you want to do an offering, you want to come out to be natural. When one does duties or does work or actions which are against one's nature, then it's not very natural, right? Just like if I want to serve my parents or my teachers or anyone you want to do any service, if that service comes naturally, then it is more appreciated, right? Or if we are nervous and we artificially try to be someone who we are not, right? And even if we execute that duty perfectly, it just comes out a little awkward, right? The other person on the receiving end can sense it. So when one acts according to the nature, one is not afflicted by sin, because something that is part of your characteristics, right? That is overlooked by the laws of karma. It's like animals, they are not subject to karmic reaction because they are just acting based on instinct, right? You cannot expect them to act any different. So humans in the Aryan society, the division of labor from a very young age, they are trained in that particular family varna. And then they're imbibed with that kind of samskaras, and so they develop those samskaras and they act on it. And so acting according to one's own nature is very, very important. And when one does not act according to one's prescribed duties, then one has fallen from being called an Aryan. Aryan also means civilized or progressive. Progressive in the sense that it's progressive for spiritual realization. So division of labor is there in all societies, right? So in the present society also we have division of labor, but that division of labor is based on skills, not based on one's nature. In that sense, it's not liberating, it's binding. But it's meant for a different kind of purpose. You can say this is also a progressive civilization, but the progressive civilization is for material comforts. While when the Aryans, they are really, when they talk about progress, by default is understood spiritual progress, because any kind of material situation is always temporary, and that is the fundamental understanding of the realization in the Vedic culture. So, so in many different ways, Krishna has, proved his statements against Arjuna's so-called compassion, and so Krishna is elaborating on that. Here, verse number 37. हतो वा प्राप्स्यसि स्वर्गं जित्वा वा भोक्ष्यसे महिं तस्मादुत्तिष्ठ कौन्तेय युद्धाय कृतनिश्चयः. O son of Kunti, either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly plans, or you will conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Therefore, get up with determination and fight. Pretty straightforward, right? It's a win-win situation. There's no reason why, should cause any dilemma for Arjuna or any other warrior for that matter. And despite of whatever the outcome be, in the long run, it's all good. Either he achieves heavenly planet, or he continues to, or he rules over this earth. Verse number 38. Sukha dukhe same kritva labha labho jaya jayo tato yuddhaya yujyasya naivam papam avapsyashi. Do thou fight for the sake of fighting without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by doing so you shall never incur sin. Purport. Here Krishna is now directly telling to Arjuna that Arjuna should fight for the sake of fighting, right? He should not take into account different kind of pros and cons. Either it's happiness or distress, whether he would win or lose, what profit he's going to get, what he will lose. And such consideration should not be there in executions of one's duty, especially in devotional activities or activities of Krishna consciousness. Everything should be performed for the sake of Krishna. Such a consciousness is transcendental consciousness. So there is no reaction to material activities. Just like when, you give an example is when an employee works for a business, right? And the employee works sincerely for the business to be successful, or for the profit of the company, right? Now, in that consideration, while one is considering the profit and loss of the company, one is not considered about personal profit or loss, right? Because one is dedicated for that higher cause, that individual is guaranteed to get one's salary. Whether the company is going to make a lot of profit, the person is still going to get the same salary. Or if the company is going to make a loss, the individual still get the same salary, right? And so in that aspect, there's nothing. One's situation is safe, and one, without worrying about personal gain or loss, one can focus, right? Without any worry, one can focus on delivering what is expected out of that individual. So when one is performing everything for the sake of Krishna, Krishna takes care of that individual, right? And here Arjuna is fighting, right? He says later in Bhagavad Gita we'll see that Krishna is telling Arjuna, you fight because he gives all these arguments. Finally says, okay, you fight because I am asking you to fight, right? So now it's a direct order, right? And so there is no question of so far Arjuna has been considering his own personal interest, his personal victory or defeat or profit or loss. And once entire Bhagavad Gita is spoken and Arjuna understands Krishna's real position, right, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he understands the greatness of Krishna, his relationship with Krishna. So far, Arjuna is considering Krishna as his cousin and a friend. But then later, when Arjuna comes to know about Krishna's original position, he says, well, I ask for forgiveness, as a friend and a cousin, I have taken you for granted. I have talked to you in a very informal way, but now Arjuna has this feeling of awe and reverence for Krishna, knowing his real position. And at that point later, Krishna is saying, okay, now you fight because I am asking you to fight. And so there is no question of personal loss or gains. So far, Arjuna is considering those aspects, and he's primarily motivated by that. So here Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he is describing that when everything is performed for the sake of Krishna, is transcendental consciousness, and there is no reaction to material activities. So there was this earlier, I believe it was Kashyap who asked that question, that when we are working, we cannot think about Krishna, right? And so how do we overcome that? And I said that, well, first of all, we need to have a daily time that is set specifically for concentrated spiritual activity. And traditionally in Varnashram system, the whole society is structured that actually whatever we do has connection with devotion or yajna or sacrifice. And that's how the entire society is structured. All the prescribed duties, they are assigned so that nothing that we do is wasted. Because even if we had all the time, right? Unless one is very spiritually elevated, we cannot even 24 hours think of Krishna. We need some engagement, right? So that spiritual perfection where one is doing nothing and just chanting or reading spiritual literature, that is very it's not possible for an ordinary being. And so the engagement is some sort of engagement in work or activities is required. And so that was the beginning of Treta Yuga, by the way, because in Satya Yuga there were actually these 4 classes were not there. There were no kingdoms. There was no civilization. The 4 Varnas did not exist in Satya Yuga. So the civilization, in the sense that establishment of kingdoms, the 4 Varnas, and then Varnashram, all of that was since the beginning of Treta Yuga. In Satya Yuga, there was only one Varna, which is Hamsa. That means the beings, they are like swans. They had no interest. As soon as the individual is born, they have no interest except for spiritual realization. And so they were not even interested in building homes or growing food through the means of agriculture. They would just go in the forest, and then they would learn how to meditate, and they would sit and meditate for thousands of years, literally. His life was 100,000 years. In Satya Yuga, maximum life was 100,000 years. Treta Yuga, maximum life was 10,000 years. Dwapar Yuga, maximum life was 1,000 years. Again, at the beginning, this is all the beginning, because as it's not like a step function. Linearly, the lifespan decreases. And so at the beginning of all these ages, that was a maximum lifespan that was possible. The beginning of Kali Yuga, 100 years was the max, and now we see that it's declining, right? And will keep on declining. So yeah, so the 4 Varnas, when they were established, the idea was that, just like if you give an example of making a food of preparation or bhoga for the Lord, right? So if you are preparing something for Krishna, first of all, the different ingredients that we use, we want to make sure they are very clean and they are pure, right? And once they are clean and pure, when we are cooking, we want to do it with the consciousness that we are not cooking for our enjoyment, we are cooking for Krishna's pleasure. And after the food is cooked, generally when you see in the temple, especially when the pujaris bring the bhoga offering, the plate for the deities, they cover with a cloth, because you don't want anyone to see the food, because when they see, they might look at it with the consciousness of hey, this is such a nice food, maybe I want to enjoy it. So you want to offer that to Krishna, and only after Krishna honors, enjoys it, then we take the remnants as prasadam, and the remnants is just like, you take remnants from someone's plate. That's like one is accepting a lower position, and so this is very purifying. And then there is a similar analogy for, you can apply the same analogy to work. If work is an offering, right, how you want to make that offering pure. I see, Kashyap, you have a question, so let me finish this line of thought and I'll let you ask your question. So the purity in action comes when we act according to our nature, right? It is not so much from, of course, you want to execute perfectly, but acting naturally is of more importance. For instance, when everyone acts according to one's abilities, right? And people have different abilities, and so they should be gauged on a scale which is appropriate for their own level, right? We cannot come up with a generic standard for everyone. So when we are acting according to our nature, that is considered purity in action, right? At least in terms of if we are impelled to act in that particular way. And so that's why the prescribed duties in the varnashram system are based on one's nature. Now, the fruits of our results, when one is acting, we should not be desirous of enjoying that, hey, I want to do this work to achieve something so that I can enjoy, the remuneration for my own sake, right? That would be like cooking food, for our own enjoyment, not for Krishna's enjoyment. And so how do you cultivate that consciousness? Again, that's a detailed topic, and we're going to discuss at appropriate time later in Bhagavad Gita. But the gist of that is that one might be initially motivated by some material remuneration, but what happens is that once we get that material remuneration, there is a law of diminishing returns. So what actually motivated, just like we are very hungry, we would be willing to do anything to get the food, right? So if somebody is serving the food and say I cannot stand anymore, please, serve me soon, and he says, okay, I can serve you soon if you help me to do this. So even so we are willing to, okay, I'll put everything aside and I'll help you to do so that the food is served earlier, because we cannot bear that hunger. Now, with each morsel of food that we eat, our hunger is satisfied. The highest satisfaction we get is from the first morsel. And there is this law of diminishing returns. Each successive morsel gives us lesser and lesser satisfaction. And when the tummy is full and we don't have any, you might have the best dish or preparation in front of you. It might be your favorite dish. It might be very delicious, but you just cannot simply eat it. And so same thing happens. So we see that in the present economic setup, we have incremental remuneration. Every year, unless we are provided a higher stimulus or higher salary, or some sort of promotion, the motivation to work does not remain constant. If the salary remains same, then the motivation won't remain same. The motivation drops. So that is true in all circumstances. Now, when the society is structured where one is impelled to act by one's nature, then what happens is, though initially the motivation might be material remuneration, what happens is the law of diminishing returns. One says that, okay, I'm not getting that same satisfaction, but whatever I'm getting, I'm able to use that to maintain my needs, and so that is good. But the same the same remuneration would lead to diminishing levels of satisfaction. And so the motivation drops. But in varnashram system, what happens is because one is impelled to act by one's according to one's nature, in the sense of duty, they will continue to act, right? And over a period of time, then they are not acting for the sake of remuneration, but they're acting simply out of the duty. And so that's how that system was structured. And so when that sense of personal enjoyment goes away, then, under the direction of learned or realized souls, as we see in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is instructing Arjuna in 3rd and 4th chapter. Krishna will explain the whole reason why we do our prescribed duties is to cultivate transcendental knowledge. Because when one cultivates transcendental knowledge, that means why we are doing what we are doing. What is the ultimate purpose of this? Who is the ultimate beneficiary of our activities? And that results of our work have to be offered as a sacrifice, as a yajna. And that when one is acting, one has that knowledge and one acts with that consciousness, then that action becomes perfect. But in the initial phases, we don't have that knowledge, but we still have to act. Just like a child, I can only tell my son that, hey, you need to do math, or you need to do English, or you need to do your homework, right? The child does not know why he needs to do that. What is the benefit he's going to get in future, right? In what consciousness he should do it, right? Right now, I might have to give some motivation, like, okay, if you do this, give 5 stars, or you get a sticker, or you get a toy, something. But when the child grows up, the child would realize, oh, why my father asked me to do this, or this was the purpose, right? And then when he has the proper understanding, he continues to pursue his higher education, then he acts in that consciousness, right? Then that action becomes perfect. But it's not that one has to wait for that knowledge to come, then only that will act. That's not going to happen. He has to start acting first, right? So the varnashram society is structured in a way that people are engaged to act in a particular way according to their nature, and eventually they will gain knowledge. Now, once they gain knowledge, it's not that they have to stop acting, right? Now they're going to act with proper knowledge, and that will bring about perfection. And so what is that proper knowledge? Okay, now the knowledge is that, okay, the results of the fruits is not for my own enjoyment, but it's enjoyment for Krishna. I have to offer it as a sacrifice, right? So there are a couple of things that is helping. One is one acquires knowledge, and before that, the allurement of that material remuneration goes away. It might be there initially, but eventually it will go away, right? Why? Because the law of diminishing returns, right? So it's not going to, one gets pretty bored out of it eventually. And there's another that, then what really motivates one to do has to be a higher cause. So the higher cause is service for Krishna, and the fact that they are able to do is because they are impelled by the nature. The nature will force them to act. Just like, I think I've given this example that this security officer at Best Buy was fired because he, did the right thing, but out of his prescribed duty of hey, you should only worry about, theft or some sort of security incident that happened on the premises of the store. Not that you go and help arrest a criminal, which he thought it was the right thing to do, but he was fired for it. But he did not regret. He says that was the right thing to do, and if this happens again, I'll do that again, because he's not impelled by remuneration. He says, okay, I lost a job, I'll get another one. What's the big deal, right? So he's a real Kshatriya, right? He's impelled by what is, he cannot stop himself. If you see a crime happening, he's going to do something about it, right? He's not going to take dictations from some CEO, right? So in the current scenario, everything stops topsy-turvy, right? So Kshatriyas are on, in the Vedic civilization, the Kshatriyas dictate the Vaishyas, right? But here's the Vaishyas, the CEOs are sitting on the top and telling this, the Kshatriyas what to be done. So anyway, so the point again I was trying to say is that when Srila Prabhupada makes this point, everything should be performed for the sake of transcendental consciousness, so that there is no reaction to material activities. So the system or the society, Varnashram society, is structured in that way. So when one can act in that transcendental consciousness, but that comes gradually. First, once one first has to first one has to start acting, then the allurement for material remuneration will go away, and then one gets the real purpose why needs to be act, and then they offer this as a sacrifice. So just like that food or bhoga that is offered to Krishna has to be purified, right? It has to be prepared in proper consciousness and then offered. So same thing, our work, when it is the action itself is pure because it is according to our nature, when it's done in a consciousness, in proper understanding of transcendental knowledge of the ultimate purpose of that activity, and then one when offers that food, the fruits of the results as a yajna or a sacrifice, the whole activity now is spiritualized, right? So because in most people, they are not going to be able to sit and do japa 24 hours. They need to be cultivated in activity. So their proclivities are spiritualized. That was the whole purpose of Varnashram system. In Srimad Bhagavatam it says, what's that verse? I can't recall that. If I remember, I'll quote that. But the essence of that verse is that the ultimate purpose of the prescribed duties for the four varnas is satisfaction of Vishnu. Okay, Kashyap, yeah, you wanted to ask a question or comment.
Thank you. I totally agree with. I'm actually getting. Just a second. I totally agree with what you said about we have to spend time, day dedicated to actually pray Krishna, or think about Krishna. That helped me from the time when we last spoke. I started spending some time, and that actually helped me in a lot of ways. Along with that, when you're talking about Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Dwapara Yuga, it's actually off the topic question. I can skip that. If something that we have to continue in this class, but off the topic, I didn't understand why the age is different with these yugas, or is there any logical reasoning behind that? Or along with that, I also have a question on the naming of it, like Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Dwapar Yuga. I mean, is there any reasoning behind those names? If you know anything about it, you don't have to answer this now if it is off topic. But yeah, it's just a question I wanted to record here.
Yeah, so I think your question had two parts. One is why the names of the yugas are named the way they are, if they have any meaning, and then why does the age decrease? Again, there is no explicit answer to the second question, but I'll tell how I understand it. Yeah, first of all, the names Satya is the age of truthfulness, or it's is also known as Krita Yuga, which is the golden age. It's perfect in all respects. Just like pure gold has no impurities. In a Satya Yuga, the four legs of religion, right, which is austerity, mercy, cleanliness, and truthfulness. These are the principles of morality by which human life begins. So when we talk about dharma again, dharma has many meanings, but it says ahar, what is ahar, nidra, bhai, maithuna cha saman pasubhi cha naranam. Dharma hi adhiko vishesho dharmena vina pasubhi naranam. So these four principles of morality, which I said, that is something you can find in human form of life, or not by default, but those could be cultivated in human form of life. But if you don't cultivate them, then there is no difference between humans and animals, because then humans just end up doing eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, which even animals do it, right? So unless one cultivates the four principles of morality, that's way one can differentiate one from animal life. Just because one has a sophisticated means to sleep, to defend, to mate, right, or to eat, and one is just a better animal or a polished animal, doesn't make one human. Now in Satyuga, all these four principles of morality were fully manifested, and so in that sense it is golden age. Like, people were not even inclined to materialistic activities, and that's why there was no need to establish kingdoms, or the Kshatriyas who established law and order, or need for cultivation or farming to produce grains and have different kind of social systems. So they were just, everyone was just fully situated in spiritual realization, and they would just sit and meditate and understand the existence of soul inside one's body, the existence of the super soul, and then just meditate on super soul and realize Paramatma and achieve perfection in that very life. The second age is actually the Dwapara age. So the Satya, you can call it as the first one. The Treta, we say Treta and Dwapara and Kalki. So it's why the order is switched. It's only in this cycle that the order is switched, and I'll tell about that later. But the logical sequence in all other ages, in one day of Brahma or 12 hours of Brahma, during the daytime of Brahma, there are 1000 cycles of these four yugas: Satya, Dwapara, Treta, Kali, in this particular order, right? And those 1000 cycles make one daytime, not the night time. The night time is equally long, but during the night, the three middle planetary systems, which is Bhu, Bhuvar, Swarga, there is no activity. Everyone's sleeping, including Brahma is sleeping, living entities also sleeping. Those few planetary systems are destroyed technically. There's an annihilation, a partial annihilation. Again, they are very long time intervals. So the one full cycle is 4.3 million years. Just like Kali Yuga is 432,000 years. Then Treta Yuga is twice of that. Dwapar Yuga is twice of Treta Yuga, and then Satya Yuga is twice of Dwapar Yuga. So they're pretty long time cycles. So in Treta Yuga, the second Yuga is Dwapar, Para. Just like Dwa means two, Pahar, Para is the second phase. Treta refers to the third one. And then Kalki is the fourth. Now Kalki literally, now the first and the fourth, they are not being referred by their order. Like the second and the third, they are referred by the order. The first is so pure, it's just referred as Satya, and the last one is so horrible that's referred by its nature. And the nature is Kalki, literally means quarrel and hypocrisy. So if you see in this world, there is constant conflict and quarrel between nations, between geographies, between countries, between states, between districts, between cities, between family, within family members. There's always some or other conflict or quarrel that goes on. We see in news horrible things, like where family members might kill each other, or for petty things, just nothing, like even children, sometimes they get hold of these weapons that they might have at home, and they might not even know, just some little argument they might have a sibling, and it could be lethal. And there is hypocrisy everywhere, right? So everyone propounds to be very righteous, but if you look at their character or their actions, then they're always acting subpar, right? The politics is all about propaganda. One is not voted or one is not elected based on one's credentials, but how nicely one can speak or how they can influence others, right? They have this debate, like now debating skill is not a skill for a Kshatriya. Like when you look at the description of Kshatriya, they're not saying that, hey, you have to be a good debater. But what do we do when the politics is, when they start canvassing, their ability to come up with these plans which might not even be realistically possible, or they have no intention on executing it, but if they are able to influence or affect the emotions of the people, they can gather votes, right? So this whole age is of quarrel and hypocrisy, and so that's why it's just named like that. So yeah, so that was the question answer on why they are named the way they are named. And then
just why they're swapped, the Dwapara and
oh yeah,
Treta.
so what happens in this particular age where Krishna, so I said there are 1000 cycles, right? 1000 cycles. So, and there are 14 Manus in one day of Brahma. So Manu is the father of mankind. So there is another even smaller partial destruction at the end of each Manu. So 14 Manus, and each Manu, I think there are 71 or 72 cycles of Chatur Yugas that happen under each Manu, right? And so in one day of Brahma, in that 1000 cycles, there is only one cycle in which Krishna appears. Krishna, original Supreme Personality of Godhead. He, in his original form, he appears only once in the entire day of Brahma. And luckily that happens to be this particular cycle among that 1000 cycles that Krishna appeared. So our Brahma is right now experiencing his 50th birthday. Brahma lives 100 years according to his lifespan. So on his 50th birthday, it is the 7th Manu. Today is the day. 7th Manu is like halfway through. So you can think of it's noon for Brahma right now on his 50th birthday. And so it's the reign of the 7th Manu that is going on right now. And the reign of the 7th Manu, each Manu, I said there are 72 Chatur Yugas. And the current Chatur Yuga is 28th Chatur Yuga is going on. And so Krishna, when he decided to appear in this particular Chatur Yuga, the ages were swapped because Krishna appears in Dwapar, in the ideal time for him to appear for all this Leelas to be fully manifest is the Dwapara age. And so for for him to there was a kind of a shifting in the ages that was done to accommodate that. And so the Treta came first and then the Dwapar came later. The other reason is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself, who appeared as a devotee to teach everyone how to practice devotional service, also appears in the same Kali Yuga that follows Dwapar Yuga. Because Krishna is speaking Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. But this is theoretical. A good teacher practically shows how to do, how to execute, not just theoretically speak. So that was not possible during Krishna's manifest pastimes. And ideally, the only way he can show is he himself becomes his devotee, right? And so Krishna, in the mood of Radharani, appears as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, appeared 500 years ago in Bengal. He is a covered incarnation. He does not directly say, like Krishna says in Arjuna, that I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he practically showed how one can practice devotional service. And in that sense, his appearance is golden. He is also golden incarnation. His complexion was golden like Radharani, mood and complexion of Radharani. And so in that order, you can, that becomes your prime attraction, because, what Krishna said only benefited Arjuna. But the practice of bhakti, which is, is increasing now in this world. First, the Vaishnava Acharyas, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, and Nimbarkacharya, all the expanded Vaishnavism. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came later and is expanding the bhakti cult. And is benefiting, is giving the highest to the most unfortunate people. And so that is the prime attraction. And so in that sense, you can see Kalki as, Kali Yuga as the first age. You're looking at a reverse order. Then the next stage after that is Dwapara. And after that is Treta, and then Satya. So you're kind of thinking in a kind of a reverse order. If you change your reference and you change it to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance within this Kali Yuga. And so in this particular cycle, the ages are swapped, but otherwise it's the Dwapara, the second age comes first, then Treta, and then Kalki. Hope that answers your question. I see there's a follow-up question, Parulven.
It's not so much the question. I think based on my reading, I was just going to share. I think the reason they're switched is it shows the degree of the loss of righteousness in the world, right? So if you start with Satya Yoga, which is, if you think of a full circle, right, then it's the Treta Yoga is about losing 1/4 of the truth. Dwapara Yoga is losing half of the truth, and then Kali Yuga is when you only have the quarter left, right? So it's kind of a circle that, and the loss of truth, and I should say the progression of evil and dishonesty, right? So it's kind of like when you think about yin and yang, it's always half and half. And I think based on 4 yogas, this just based on my reading, it's based on the level of truth that's lost in each age.
So the 4 levels of the 4 pillars of morality, they are going through degradation continuously from one age to another age, and that actually happens in any cycle. And so when the ages were swapped, that is still happening as it was happening in the previous cycle, right? Each subsequent yuga, there is a degradation in all of that. But what is different is more about the prescribed duties that are different in all these ages. So the prescribed duty in Satya Yuga is meditation. In Treta Yuga, the prescribed duty is yajna, offering of fire sacrifice, by which one can achieve spiritual perfection. In Dwapara, it is deity worship. And Kali Yuga, the only thing you can really do is Nama Sankirtan. You can only chant the holy names of the Lord. And so when the ages were swapped, the prescribed duties would also be swapped, but the degradation would still kind of continue as would otherwise, right? Successively in each age. So it's not that, to be more specific, it doesn't mean that in a normal cycle what would happen is, well, Satya Yuga would be ideal, and in Dwapara, which comes next, would have on a quarter loss, and then Treta would have half of the loss. Kali Yuga would degrade further, right? Now what happens is, when the ages are swapped, the degradation is not swapped. So what happens is that the degradation that happens in the 1/2 degradation now would happen in Treta. Sorry, quarter degradation would happen in Treta, and then half degradation would happen in Dwapar. And so that degradation still follows that same linear drop, though the ages are swapped. But what does perpetuate with the swap is the corresponding prescribed duties for spiritual realization. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I never thought about the names are swapped till now, but when you're explaining it, I just got this question, like why you're calling Treta first and Dwapara second, and that raised this question to me, like, what are the names, why the names are like that. So yeah, I think, yeah, thanks for explaining.
It's there in Srimad Bhagavatam. I think is the first chapter. It says that when it was time for Krishna's arrival, the ages were swapped. I'll share that reference later. Okay. Any other questions anyone has? Okay. So he who acts for his own sense gratification, either in goodness or in passion, is subject to reaction, good or bad, right? But he who has completely surrendered himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness, no longer obliged to anyone, nor is he a debtor to anyone, as one is in the ordinary course of activities. Yeah, so when one is not motivated, initially one might be motivated for material remuneration, but when one realizes the real reason why one has to act. Just like a child, when he initially does not know why he has to study, what benefit is going to get, then there is a action and reaction. If he does, listens to his parents, listen to the parents and does the homework nicely, gets good grades, then the parents might reward the child, right? So that's a good reaction. And if the child does not listen and does not do the homework, doesn't get good grades, then there might be punishment. And so this might be the motivation initially, but eventually when the child really understands why one needs to do, why one needs to study, right, then one acts in a transcendental knowledge, and the child is now not motivated by some gift or some appreciation that one might get, or is not acting in fear of punishment, right? It's the same thing. Even as adults, we, in one sense, we are still kind of children. We act in a childish way, and we are affected by different material allurements. But when we get spiritual maturity, when we understand the ultimate purpose, and then we have a higher motivation, and so we are not concerned about the mundane good and bad. So anyone who has fully surrendered unto Krishna, Mukunda, who is the giver of liberation, giving up all other duties, is no longer a debtor, nor is he obliged to anyone, not to the demigods, nor the sages, nor the people in general, nor kinsmen, nor humanity, nor forefathers. So this is a true statement. Again, this applies to one who is fully liberated. This doesn't apply to people who are still practicing and trying to achieve spiritual perfection. One cannot prematurely, give up one's obligation to the society, to the demigods, to the forefathers. But when one is really acting for a higher cause, right, and one is fully dedicated and surrendered to Krishna, then all those obligations does not apply. Just like a person who joins an army, right, for a higher cause, for the service of the nation. One might be doing, in order to do that, one gives up, might leave one's family back, young wife, children, elderly parents. And one might question, like, hey, you are giving up for this patriotism, which sometimes politicians exploit it for their own gains. And what about the people who really cared for you so much, your family members, right? But then again, for a higher cause, when one does that, then one is not obliged, in the sense that people it's not going to criticize them. Rather, government, actually, we see many times those who are martyrs, the government would give very generous compensation, so that family members are taken care of, right? Now, if someone whimsically gives up their family, said, I don't want all these responsibilities to take care of my parents and family members, and that is not appreciated by anyone, people will criticize and will condemn such an individual. Same thing, if one artificially gives up one's obligation, then that is not appropriate. But this is for someone who is fully surrendered, then all those obligations don't apply. Krishna would personally take care of whatever needs and obligation one had to fulfill to the demigods, to the sages, or the forefathers. So that is taken care of by Krishna, for one is fully surrendered, 100%. So this is the indirect hint given by Krishna to Arjuna in this verse. That matter will be explained clearly in later verses. Krishna is not directly saying over there, Prabhupada is explaining that in providing more context to it, but Krishna is saying, he's not saying do it for me, or because still Arjuna does not have that full understanding. He's still thinking Krishna is just my cousin and a friend, but so he's not instructing Arjuna at that level. He's just saying that you should fight for the sake of fighting, for the sake of duty, because duty is the overarching principle by which he should be guided, and not by any material gains of profit and loss. Just like a mature child, and Arjuna is a mature student, he, at least at this level, right? though we might not have achieved spiritual instruction, but in the codes of morality or understanding varnashram dharma is not like a a very young child which needs to be given the fear or motivation by some gift or prize to do one's activity. A mature student and elder student is self-motivated and does one's study or other obligations out of sense of duty. And so Krishna is asking Arjuna to act on that platform. So that is the sum and substance of this particular verse. I think that's it. Yeah, I think we'll take a break. So I did complete those 38 through 38, which is what I intended to do. I think we'll take a break, and so then we'll take up a next theme next time. And going forward, I'll try to cover in a thematic fashion, and so that we can hopefully cover larger chunks and also maintain continuity of flow in a logical way, so you don't lose the the storyline of how the conversation is progressing. Any questions anyone has at this point in time? No? Okay. So I think we'll conclude today's class. We had only 5 attendees this time. Again, I know because it's a long weekend, we'll be recording the session. I'll post it. So the next is 2nd, and I think it will be just after the new year. I think, yes, still a long weekend. So just want to again get an opinion. Would you still be planning to attend next week's class, or would you like to have a break? So at least if you're 5, maybe we'll continue. But if some of you are not planning to attend, and if you only have 1 or 2, then we might as well take a break next week. Anyone has any opinions? So those who would like the class can raise your hand. Let me make it simple. Okay, so you have 2 individuals who would like to attend. So actually you're only 4, I was counting myself, so half of them. Okay, in that case, okay, Shiva also wants to attend. Okay, what about Maulik? Maulik, you plan to attend, or no pressure? If you have other things going on, that's fine. So it's still going to be only 3 individuals. You know what? I think we'll continue. You want to say something, Maulik?
Yeah, I was telling we can continue. I'm okay with that.
Okay. Okay, so we'll have the class next Saturday. We'll have it. So we'll keep moving forward. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Happy holidays.
Very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Hare.